lots of people entering.
Just started the recording.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you, Johnny. And I'll hand over to you then, B, and I'll keep just entering people.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you so much. So it's a pleasure to be chairing the webinar today with Ellen Lee and Nikki Totton. I've known Nikki for quite some time, and I had the pleasure to actually join one of these meetings. So I feel particularly connected to this session and to what they're going to present. I'm very excited to hear from them, but I'm sure they'll do a better job at explaining what it is about and what their role is in it. So I'll hand over to them.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you so much for having us. So yes, I'm Ellen Lee, and it's going to be me and Nikki sharing with you this morning. And we're really here to tell you about a PPIE methodology panel that we've been running for the last year and a half. So I'll tell you more about that. Yeah, so first, just to introduce you to us and the organising group. So we're all from the University of Sheffield. I'm a statistician, and so is Nikki. And then we've got Professor Stephen Walters, who helps us chair the meeting and also bankrolls the whole operation. And then we've got Dr. Louis Stokes, who's a qualitative researcher. So the four of us kind of run and organise this panel. So just before I tell you what we've been doing, I just thought I'd go through some of our kind of the barriers and the challenges that I know we're all very aware of. So here's a few that I kind of picked out. The ones in blue are more from the public perspective. So the public can feel less motivated getting involved in methodology research. They can be unaware of opportunities, and there could be a lack of trust if they don't have any experience and don't know the researchers they're going to be working with, unlike kind of, you know, maybe clinical researchers. In the pink, these are the slightly more researcher focused, so there might not be a defined patient population for our methodology research. It can be difficult to determine a target audience, and statisticians can be lacking in skills in involving the public. We might not be as experienced. And then those without a box are kind of common to both parties, so it can be hard to see the relevance. Some of our stats methodology can be quite complex, including a lot of jargon, and there can be lack of clarity on the role of PPI, and existing involvement approaches might not work. So those are some of maybe the challenges, but what motivated us to arrange this panel? Well, we were convinced that PPIE and methodology research was important and valuable, and also aware that it's necessary in a lot of contexts. So a lot of public funders, such as NIHR, kind of mandate this in any funding application. And we were really keen to gather a group of patients and members of the public that were engaged in and kind of keen to be part of methodology research. So this self-selecting group that they were keen to input into research methods, and also a group that were knowledgeable. So more typically having already done some PPI, so having some experience of kind of PPI or research methods. And just keen to kind of, oh yes, and also to say that we were really keen to kind of help other methodologists in doing PPI. So you know, we think it's a super thing, but we really wanted to support other methodologists in doing it. So yeah, so this was our aim, to produce this group where researchers can approach patients and the public who have interest in adequate training in methods in order to input meaningfully into their research projects. Okay, so I'll pass on to Nikki to take us through setting up the group.
Brilliant, thanks, Ellen. So we just wanted to quickly talk about how we went about setting up the group, because we know sometimes this can be difficult, and particularly when we talk to researchers, they're not sure where to find public members from, which is, as Ellen said, part of the reason why we wanted to set this group up. So as Ellen has said, we recruited patients in the public that had already had experience with research. So that could either be just as a patient within a research project, or more typically as a PPIE member on another panel or group. We did this very deliberately because we know, as Ellen said, the methodology research can be more removed. Patients can feel less confident in inputting to these sort of methods questions. And so we decided early on we wanted to bring in people that had had at least a little bit of experience with research, so that they had some understanding that we could then build on and discuss those methodology topics. So this was very deliberate, but is not a long-term plan for the group. The idea is in the future to be able to include more members that didn't have experience before, but we wanted this to get started with a group and then be able to add in additional members afterwards. So we went to our local teaching hospital, which has numerous panels and contacts, so that was our obvious first port of call. We also went to existing groups such as the People in Research and Data Can organisation, and put out this flyer that's on the slide there, and an email. But what really worked well is our known PPIE members, or PPIE from a group. And so often we would have calls and discussing with people running other groups. Often they were PPIE members. And what worked really well was if we would then send an email to them and they forwarded it onto their group, and often they would add some additional information, you know, such as, we've spoken to the group and this is a fantastic opportunity and this is what they're trying to do. And that, putting it into different words, not just coming from us, really worked to get a lot of people interested in the group. Can I go next slide, please, Ellen? Thanks. So we set up this PPIE methodology panel, and we've had meetings running since June 2023. So it's actually been over 2 years now. And we have had in total 8 online meetings. We originally were aiming, we thought optimistically, for 10 people to be interested in being part of the group. And we actually ended up with 22 members of the panel. And we have at least 15 attending each meeting. So even though all 22 don't attend every meeting, we have really good attendance at each of the meetings that we've had. Within the meeting, we have 2 or 3 facilitators. So as Ellen said, we have often Stephen Walters chairing the meeting, or then have somebody else sort of just keeping watch on the chat and keeping to time, things like that. And then if needed, we can have a third person that's just available watching emails, something like that. We've had 17 projects that we've reviewed through these meetings. The vast majority are at a pre-funding stage. So people are coming, they're putting an application in and they want some PPIE input to what they're putting in. And then they also can ask if anybody wants to be part of their project moving forward. So that's something that we have said is possible when they're at that pre-funding stage. We've also had some people when their project's already in progress. So they might be trying to finalise some of their ideas or have some input into their project as they're moving through the work. And then some that have already finished and they're writing up and they want some input into how the information that they're presenting is coming across. So this is currently centrally funded at the University of Sheffield, and so it is free for the researchers that are coming. And we do send, in terms of recruitment for researchers, we email within our school at the university, as that's where it's funded, but otherwise it's just word of mouth recruitment, or people that have seen things at conferences or webinars like this that will then contact us to be part of the group. So we just wanted to give a quick example of how we run these meetings. So we have, over the meetings, we've kind of settled on this sort of agenda and this setup, and this pretty much is what we do most meetings now. So we tend to have 3 projects as a maximum, but usually 3 projects within a 2-hour meeting. And we send an agenda beforehand, which looks like this. We have the project, the title of the project, and then we will also send attached documents with a summary, so a plain English summary for each of the projects, and then also any other information, but that will almost always include some specific questions that the researchers would like feedback on from the panel. So that's all sent in advance. We then allow up to a 10-minute presentation from each of the researchers, and then have 20 to 25 minutes for discussion after that presentation, again, really focusing on those questions that have been sent out beforehand to aid the discussions and the input from the PPIE members. Really importantly, we have a short comfort break after each project. So we found this is really important in order to have enough time and allow that break. But what we also find is not everybody needs or wants that break. So sometimes if somebody has something really pressing they want to say and they don't want a break, then those discussions will go through into that break and can continue. So the researcher gets another 5 or 10 minutes there if there's people that have something to say. So some of the successes from our perspective as the running the group, we feel like we've created a really engaged and knowledgeable group who are really keen to input to lots of different projects of many different methodological areas. And then, as I said, they really are interested to continue to be involved when the project maybe gets funded, or they will go on to do other activities or groups. We have quite a diverse group with respect to many different characteristics. And although we never set quotas or anything or made sure that this happened, what we did do is we really focused on contacting people that already had PPI groups with a focus of diversity and inclusion. And so we really focused our recruitment to try to make sure we could have as diverse group as possible, as that was something that was really important to us from the beginning. And it is actually something that comes up a lot in a lot of our meetings and our group discussions. The members of the group are very proactive and opinionated in the absolute best way. They are not shy to say what they think, and many people really respect that they're getting really core feedback from people. And we feel like it's a really valuable resource for methodologists. It can be hard to find a PPIE group, particularly at the pre-funding stage when you don't have any money. And so this is a free resource for methodologists. And so we think it's a really valuable resource. But it's not just us that think it's a success. So I wanted to give some other perspectives. So after each of the meetings, we will send the researchers a really short questionnaire as to, how they found the panel, any improvements we could make, and then also, what they got from it. So we can make sure we are still providing something that's useful to people. And these are some of the quotes that we've taken from the researchers. I think what we wanted to highlight here is things about being really supportive, the energy and engagement of the panel, and the valuable insights that they've been providing for the researchers, and asking great questions. And I think what a few people have said is that they've been able to come having no PPI experience before, and finding the panel supportive and able to ask the questions that they need without having the added pressure of leading and creating a group for themselves. So from this feedback, we very unscientifically picked out some themes. So this wasn't done just as a qualifier, it wasn't done properly, but these are the sort of things that people were talking about. We put it into 4 things. First one being clear and simple communication. This comes up all the time, but having really accessible language, the idea of adding illustrations and making sure that really key concepts are understandable for patient and public members. As I said, the importance of inclusion and diversity, this often comes up, and the panel are often giving ideas of other perspectives or ways to approach different types of people. They're also giving really practical tips for their project, so how they can access PPI members, how they can support them and offer different training for them. And finally, the potentially different formats. So we're often used to seeing a project meeting with 1 or 2 PPI members who come and give their insights. And what our panel's been doing is offering alternatives to that. You know, could you do an open day, or could you have this other dissemination event? So giving people ideas of other ways they can engage PPIE members. And with these, we actually fed these back to the PPIE panel a few months ago. So that was something that came up really early on, is that the PPIE members wanted to know what happened with the projects, but also know that their input was being valued and actually used. And so this is what we summarised and then fed back to them, so they could see that the researchers were actually finding new information and moving forward with that from what they had given them. So of course we have some challenges, as you would expect, but here, this is just a replication of Ellen's slide earlier, which is general challenges that we find with PPIE and methodology research particularly. And so I just wanted to bring this back up because when people think the public are less motivated or they don't want to be involved in this type of research, that's actually not what we found at all. We had a really, really good response to this this group, much better than we had expected, and we really find that the PPIE members are really engaged in the discussions and they really want to be involved. So there's definitely, on our end, we haven't found a motivation issue. If we can just go to the next slide, I think the two of the things that we really have found that have pulled through are about the complex topics and jargon. Again, this really continues to come up, and then maybe based on that, statisticians lacking some of the skills in involving the public. So one of the challenges we do have is we spend a lot of time, or we spend time with the researchers prior to them coming to the meeting, in order to try to help know what to present, what sort of questions would be useful, that sort of thing. So we're really trying to help the statisticians when they do come to the meeting, but that obviously does then take time. So we've now created a crib sheet, but we still do often have meetings with people or go through their presentations beforehand. Also, in terms of time for us as organisers, there's a lot of administration involved in organising a meeting, of course, and processing payments can be a real time-consuming activity. That's definitely not something to underestimate. We've actually had problem managing the demand from the researcher side lately, even without massive promotion for the group. When we do send an email to our school, we'll typically end up filling up the next 2 meetings, if not more, with people that are interested. So trying to make sure that we have enough meetings to meet that demand, and the timings of that demand, which can be sometimes tricky as people maybe don't feel ready too far ahead of a deadline, but also it can't be too late. And that comes into finding funding. So obviously we're limited by the funding that we have, otherwise we could put a meeting on every month and, you know, have the perfect timing for every different researcher. We're currently funded for a certain amount, which will eventually run out, and so finding funding can be really difficult for a more long-term panel. And from the PPIE side, sometimes it can be difficult to manage the contributions in the meeting if lots of people want to say things, or if some people are saying in the chat, or some people are maybe sending emails if they feel more comfortable that way. Sometimes that can be a bit challenging, and then as ever with video calls and technology, that can sometimes be an issue. But I feel like after quite a few meetings now, people are starting to get into the rhythm of it. So I think sometimes that can just take some time to get through the teething problems.
Okay, back to me.
Yeah.
Good. Right, I'm going to take you through some of our recommendations, what we've learned, what we think would be useful for you to hear. I've sort of split these into, you know, running a panel if you're thinking of something like that, and then also PPIE and methodology research. So as far as running a panel, really think about the purpose of the panel. You know, are you after some in-depth project understanding, or are you after a wide range of views on projects? You know, do you want a kind of different perspectives? Do you want some recommendations on how to proceed, that sort of thing? one thing that Nikki's already mentioned is that we really think having at least 2 facilitators is really valuable. So that's in addition to the researchers that are presenting at the meeting. And so that's, yeah, that really helps the success. Usually someone kind of leading the meeting, sort of chairing, maybe keeping an eye on time, but someone else keeping an eye on the contributions and the chat and perhaps troubleshooting. And typically we sometimes have, you know, 3 of us doing, you know, splitting those roles between 3 of us. Yeah, one thing to really recommend, which we think really increases the kind of the value and the amount of contributions, the volume of contributions, is enabling multiple ways to contribute. So we typically have, you know, people contributing verbally, putting their hand up, waiting to say something. There's always a lot going on in the kind of written chat. And then also making sure people are aware that they're able to kind of email their thoughts before or after the meeting. So it just kind of it's an accessibility thing as well, isn't it? It just enables people to contribute in a way that they feel comfortable. We'd also really recommend that you provide a clear structure for the PPIE members who might be less familiar with research meetings. So again, we set the agenda, we send it out beforehand. And actually, I think it's been really beneficial to have kind of, you know, the topics and the projects are always changing, but the format of the meeting remains the same. So they really know, right, this is it. It's 3 projects. We've got 3 chunks. We've got a nice break in between each one. It always starts with a presentation, so it has a clear structure, and I think that helps with familiarity. We would really recommend that you provide researchers with tips and advice on how to present to the PPIE panel. And this is, we've taken different forms in the way that we've done it. So at times we've, you know, kind of met with researchers beforehand and sort of had a half an hour or an hour meeting where we've sort of prepped them, given them feedback on their slides. That's obviously very like labor intensive doing that. And so perhaps at a minimum, it's having some just kind of standard information. So we also have this sort of 1-page information for presenting researchers that just suggests how they can get the best out of the panel. Yeah, we'd recommend that online meetings. We've really found them to be acceptable for the PPIE members, and that actually they've really improved diversity and access to groups. So actually we asked at the beginning, asked the members what they prefer, and actually many said online, and it really enables people to, you know, give that 2 hours for the meeting, but actually they can fit that in around, you know, work commitments, childcare commitments, that sort of thing. So I think it really kind of enables them to join the meeting. We'd recommend the meetings a maximum of 2 hours and including sufficient comfort breaks. Again, I think this is really key for sort of methodology research. Like, it can be really heavy stuff, can't it? Really trying to get your head around some of the concepts. And so being able to have like a 10-minute away from the screen and come back fresh for the next project, I think is very valuable. And then an obvious one, provide suitable payments for the PPIE members, and that's a link to the NIHR guidance. So now some recommendations, some more general recommendations for PPIE in methodology research, and particularly stats methodology. So PPIE can have very useful and meaningful contributions, but it really needs to be properly considered. And so a really valuable thing that we found is that they can really well contribute to communication. So that can be the plain English summary. It could be helping you reduce jargon. It can be helping define technical concepts, for example, adaptive designs, or even, you know, describing the work and describing the value of the work. So we've had real success with this. You know, something like, for example, like using routine data in research, or another project we had, which was considering kind of carbon emissions in nice decision making, actually getting the group to say, well, do you value this, and in what way do you value this research? I think has, you know, given great success. Yes, they we've also found that the PPI members really are very good at guiding how they could contribute meaningfully into a project in the future, or how PPIE can be run in the future. So again, it's not coming to them with this sort of, this is what we're expecting you to do, but actually saying, well, actually, how can you contribute, and how is the contribution going to be most effective? And then I put a flippant final point, which is methods, dissemination, all of it, because I think there's no limit. And again, that's something that we've really seen, is that we can think like, oh, you know, it's methodology research, right? They can contribute to the plain English summary, but that's about it. Whereas actually, personally, I found when doing PPI for a project that I'm leading, you know, the questions they ask about the methods, or the way they challenge, you know, my choice of methods, has really kind of informed what I've gone on to choose to do. So actually, it's, you know, we've got to, I'm speaking to myself here, not to be limited in my thinking of where they can contribute. So how to get the best out of the PPIE members. So we would really recommend that you prepare and ask specific questions. So we always ask the presenting researchers to prepare some questions, ideally sent in advance. So, you know, so that people are able to, if they want to, read the questions and think about answers in ahead of the meeting, make them feel perhaps more comfortable. And we'd really recommend doing both open and closed questions. So we found that having some sort of closed questions, or questions that are easy to answer, can really help sort of draw out some of the members and make them feel more comfortable. Again, particularly for topics that are quite removed from patient and public experience. Having said all that, it's also really valuable to leave space for general comments. And at times, you know, things, really important thoughts can emerge that actually haven't been led by the researchers' questions. They've just been led by the responses, you know, the questions that the panel themselves have asked. Yes, okay, so think through how you'll present and explain statistical terms without jargon. So there are many ways that you can do this, using a glossary of terms, for example, using available resources, or, you know, thinking of sort of illustrations or metaphors to get across your idea. A really useful one is thinking like, could you explain it to your friends and family? And again, with a lot of the presenting researchers that haven't had as much experience working with PPIE groups, sometimes you've kind of forgotten what's research and what's just common knowledge, and what's jargon and what's not. So thinking about it in that terms, I think, is really valuable and really draws out the best input from the panel. So working with the PPIE members, think about the prior experience of the members. So those with some previous experience doing PPIE could be very useful, especially for research that's kind of particularly removed from patient and public experience. However, you might also want to consider people with no previous research experience at all, who've never done PPI before. You might want a mix of those perspectives. I think there's no like right way to do it, and there's benefits from both. So it's just like thinking through. And then also thinking through a training plan together with your PPI members in order to support their input. So again, it's asking them, you know, what do you want out of this? What do you think, what training do you think would help you? Looking out for available resources. And again, thinking through the format is, you know, 10 minutes training at the beginning of a group, each time you meet, useful, or attending external training, you know, that sort of thing. Okay, so those are some of our thoughts, our recommendations, but I just have a couple of slides really trying to give you like the voice of the panel and what the PPIE members have said and what they've reflected on. So when Nikki and Stephen set the panel up, they asked the members, you know, why are you signing up to this group? And again, there were kind of three sort of themes that stood out to us. So the first one is to give back to research, and here are kind of some of the quotes. So a real sense of contributing to improving research, contributing to health and social care research that people can trust, a chance to use my insight and experience further in healthcare research. So yeah, so that was something that really stood out, was the desire to give back to research. Also personal learning and interests. So again, kind of insight into the decision making, greater understanding of methods, gaining new skills and knowledge. And so really kind of like, you know, being part of methodology research in order to learn and in order to develop. And then also improving skills in PPIE. So here are a couple of quotes: gaining more confidence in PPIE work and further developing my skills as a lay advisor to research. So I just find like reflecting on that really encouraging. I think sometimes we can feel like we're twisting an arm to get someone involved in methodology research, or perhaps it's mainly about, you know, the financial payment, or who knows, but actually these are really encouraging that there is the appetite and there is a keenness to be involved in methodology research. So that was what they said at the beginning of the panel being set up. And so after about a year and a half, we asked them again for some feedback on how they thought the panel was going, what they thought needed to be improved. So here are a few things that they found. So the PPI members felt really valued, and they thought that the meetings were a good use of time. So we're really pleased that that's something that we've been able to, you know, foster. However, sometimes the aims of the group or the were not fully understood, and also the understanding the presentation you know, wasn't just fully understood, or they didn't feel that they were able to give their opinion confidently because they hadn't quite understood what the point of the research was. So that's something that was quite lacking that we want to work on. We asked the PPIE for some suggestions and some sort of tips, and they really reiterated the need for simple language. And here's a quote from one of the members saying, "Remember, not everybody will have the same level of understanding as you do." And so that's something we're going to work on. And again, a couple of things: is important to send the information ahead of time and ensuring enough space for people to speak. So this feedback we're really like reflecting on. So one thing we're doing is we're trying to improve our kind of one-page information for presenting research, is to really emphasize that communication is important, that keeping the language plain and simple and being considerate of kind of other people's you know, understanding will be very valuable. And again, thinking about the aims of the group, perhaps that's something that we need to go back to them and just you know, reiterate to the panel, actually this is the point of what we're doing, and this is our aim, so we can improve those two elements. Okay, so in summary, we have found that PPIE is so valuable in methodology research, and the public is knowledgeable and have important perspectives. At a very minimum, you know, involvement in a plain English summary and dissemination is so valuable. We've also found that communicating with the public about your research can really help solidify your research plan and communicate a story much more effectively. We found that challenges exist in running the group. It is a lot of work for Nikki and I in particular, and it's not kind of part of our kind of, you know, core funded role. Most of what we do, we're funded on NIHR projects basically. So this is sort of we do in our spare time, our spare work time. So it's a huge amount of work for us, and there are a number of challenges, but they can be overcome. And we really think that a methodology PPI group that isn't project specific is a really valuable resource for the researchers and us as organisers and the PPIE members. So we've really found like enabling people to come to a ready formed group that will just be super supportive, super you know, ready with engagement and opinions has actually hugely helped our kind of colleagues who are methodology researchers, that many of them have never done PPIE before. And it's a real springboard, particularly at that grant application stage, that then really sort of springs them into kind of doing good quality PPIE in their research projects if they're funded. Okay, so that's our presentation done. I don't know if you want to do general questions, and then I've also got like some prompts for what I would love to hear from everyone else about their thoughts.
That sounds good. So I guess we can see if anyone has questions in the chat, or if they want to raise their hands, feel free to do that. I can start if no one has an immediate question, so people have some time to think about it. I was interested in the fact that the group that leads this initiative is made of 3 statisticians and a qualitative researcher. And I wondered if you think that that mix of skills is important, whether that just happened by chance or whether it was on purpose. But also I would love for you to comment on the fact that 3 are statisticians. So there is this idea that statisticians might not be as keen to do it, but you've done it. So what made you do it?
Do you want me to go?
No, you go.
Okay. So I think at the beginning it was out of difficulty that we were finding submitting applications, methodology applications, as statisticians, and not being able to find the support we needed. So that's where it initially came from, and that's why I think in our group we are then 3 statisticians. Also, I think because it's not officially part of our role, you sort of have to take people that have the time to do it. So there's also a practical element. I think since adding Louis, who is the qualitative researcher, I think that's added a really nice new insight, and I think he brings some really useful tips and thoughts from his perspective, which yeah, as statisticians we had never really thought of before, and so I think it's been really good to have a bit more diversity in that, but yes, it is tilted towards statisticians. Ellen, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I think funnily enough, like Nikki, Stephen and I, like none of us had really done a lot of PPIE before, so we've been sort of like learning on the job, and it's been quite a steep learning curve for us, but I feel like we just learned huge amounts in the first, you know, doing this over 2 years now, whereas Louis actually does loads of PPIE, loads of co-production, so it's been great to have him kind of bring his different perspectives and that sort of thing. So I think that's been very valuable. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a really thoughtful answer. So I can't see any hands up or messages on the chat. So Ellen, I don't know if you want to take over and do your prompts. I have plenty of questions, but I'm sure you'll want to do some of yours.
Yes, okay. So I think firstly, I just wonder what everyone kind of thinks of this sort of setup, and whether, I don't think we're aware of other institutions or other groups doing this. So it'd be really interesting to hear if anyone else is doing something similar, and whether like the idea of it is attractive to you, and whether you're thinking of setting up something similar within your research group or at your institution. So that's kind of my first group of questions.
Ellen, I have a suggestion. I don't know if people will be up for that, but if people could just raise their hands if they have a specific PPI group in their institution that addresses methodological research, and if they are public partners joining us, if they're aware of any other PPI group specifically targeting methodological. I can't see any hands raised. Oh, I can see Helen has raised her hand, so there's another one at least.
I was really interesting because I'm trying to set this up myself exactly, and ironically it is 3 statisticians trying to do this as well, which tickled me. But we ran our sort of first meeting, and we've had lots of sort of interest, but I found it really difficult to actually get this going. I had to talk myself into putting my hand up as well and share. I'm not very good at this sort of thing. And one of the things that I've really, really struggled with is that they can't get out of the mindset of this is a trial. This is a specific person's project. And my colleagues had a little bit more joy because they had some really good examples. But I'm interested in treatment switching for complex interventions. So I started off with, imagine a trial, what things would you like to know? And it went downhill from there. I'm not saying that it wasn't, I'm not saying that it wasn't a good experience. I certainly learned a lot from it. But when I saw that you were doing this and you had an agenda and things, and I thought, maybe we should link up and have a look. Because I hear you, is that there's lots of things that you can get out of it. But I sat there and said, how can you help me? And they looked at me blankly, and then I looked at them blankly. So I think you have to get the right people. And I advertised in very similar ways to you with the Be Part of Research and used my networks for existing PPI groups. But I found that the existing PPI groups was almost a hindrance because they were so used to it being in this format with this outcome, and they wanted a lay abstract to review. And I don't know, I'm just
I have a
thought
on that. No, it is. And I think one of the first things we did, so we had, well, first of all, when we were creating the group, one of us had a very short call with each of the members that wanted to join. So we got a bit of an idea of sort of what their baseline understanding level was. And then one of the first meetings we had, when I think we only had one researcher, and then I think actually it was Beatrice who came to one of our first ones to so firstly we did that as an example of this is a sort of thing someone's going to present to you, and what might you ask them in that situation. So I think actually they went straight into it, didn't they? They were ready and they were fine, but we did that as a sort of example. Beatrice didn't actually necessarily need feedback for a project, but it was something that was probably going to be of interest to them, and it was like an example of what could come in the future. And then what we also did was a very short presentation on what is methodology research, and we gave a couple of the common ideas that are coming through. We tried, it was a bit of a balance because you don't want to give too much information in case a researcher comes and is trying to explain something. We kind of said, there's adaptive designs, and we're thinking about using routine data and things like that as examples, as things that people might come. Whether they already knew that, I don't know. I don't know whether that we could maybe ask them if that was actually helpful to them or not. But that is something we did quite early on to sort of set the scene. So I don't know if at the beginning of a meeting, even for 10 minutes, you could kind of do something like that.
Yeah, we showed the little video that on the website. I thought that was really good because I work a lot in orthopedics. I was talking about tools and hammers, and people were saying to me, we don't like the idea of people using hammers on our joints. And I thought, I don't think you should talk to some of the surgeons then. But actually, the garden spade was quite a good example of how to talk, but I haven't quite got my head around how to do that. But I think your idea of having maybe that one-to-one meeting beforehand might be something that could be quite useful, but I'm a bit of a loss now about what my next steps are.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's time consuming, so it's tricky, but it was literally 10 minutes. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts.
Anyway, Jonathan's got his hand up, so I'll shut up now.
Yeah. And just to say, Helen, thank you so much for sharing, because it's not easy to come on and say, actually, I've tried it and it hasn't worked. And I'm sure that happens to everyone, but actually saying it in this setting. So thank you for sharing. Johnny, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was actually going to partly sympathise with Helen that. So when we developed that video, I don't know if you know the full story behind it, but we tried
taking that in a different format to start with and explain it through the metaphor of a clinical trial, and that was an absolute disaster and they hated it. So it's definitely not a unique experience for you to feel that, I think. But yeah, we've found with visual metaphors and examples that we can really explain our research, and that kind of takes it out of the applied setting sometimes in quite a nice way. But it's not an easy thing to do, and it's been like hard for us to kind of think about a bit more creatively about our work. And then I was also going to mention that we have a PPI group that we've been to a couple of times with our more methodsy projects, which has been really good to kind of not need to have that set up and explaining what methods research is every single time. But it would be really good, I think, to set it up as a more regular thing like you guys have been talking about. And I wondered if you've got any like fears. I think my apprehension would be it would go really well for the first few, and we've got lots of people that would want to talk about their research to PPI groups, and then after a couple of meetings people go like, oh, we haven't got any more updates because these projects take quite a long time. It's got 6 months to a year before you can see any tangible changes. Have you kind of struggled to fill some of these meetings, or have you always got kind of a steady stream of projects going?
Yeah, our experiences, we haven't struggled, but I guess we open ours up quite widely. So I think at the start we were very broad and open. So we had both researchers within our institution and outside, and partly that was because we weren't sure where future funding was going to come from. So we almost wanted to kind of tick both boxes. And I think now it's much more our institution, and we do sort of do a kind of 2-tier system. So we prioritize methodology projects, but we also have seen kind of more applied projects. So I think we kind of like cast the net quite wide, don't we? And so we actually do have a lot of interest, and then we just do prioritize purely methodology projects, or projects that are quite generic or quite far removed from sort of patient experience, that sort of thing, but might still be like an applied question. Yeah, so I think that's, yes, again, like if it's something that was just within your group, and I know our members are keen, they really want to be meeting regularly, hearing updates regularly. And I think sometimes saying something like, oh, it's going to be once a year, or it's going to be when we need you, isn't as acceptable, is it? Or it's, yeah, there's less momentum, isn't there, I guess.
So I don't see any other hands up. I can see Helen's just saying in the chat about the feedback and updates and how important that is. I guess.
Yeah, sorry. Can I
go
just
ahead.
add that definitely, Helen, we could definitely contact after and we can share any resources or anything. But I mean, I 100% feel your pain as well, because the first time I presented my research, it got absolutely torn to shreds and they hated it. So it's definitely
That's
hard.
fantastic.
Yeah,
I'll drop you an
yeah.
email afterwards.
Yeah. I think they said they didn't understand it, and it was too, I can't remember, but it was brutal.
I don't think it was that brutal. I think
it felt it.
But yeah, they weren't afraid to be like, that doesn't make sense. Or
Yeah,
I
I think you need to test it quite a few times until you get it
Definitely.
right. I think that's definitely a lesson from what we're hearing now, and that's been my experience too. I can see Ruth has her hand up. Ruth, do you want to ask your question or comment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it sounds like everyone, the main message I'm getting from this is really, really hard. And it requires a lot of prep and several runs at it and stuff like that, which it seems very daunting. And I think linking back to what other people have said, as a statistician, that's not the stuff that you get trained for. That's not the stuff you're expecting to do. So it's really, not only is it hard and different, it's outside your comfort zone. And I think there's issues there about encouraging people to do this kind of thing. But the question I actually had is about, sort of touched on by a few people. If you present your method and you talk about an example, how do you stop people talking about the example rather than the methods behind the example?
Do you want to go? No, and then I'll go. So I think firstly, say it is challenging, but I think that is maybe one of the benefits of having these longer term groups that are project specific, is that they sort of get more into the swing of things, and we get better at advising researchers before they come. Oh, we know that they will ask this, or that we know that won't be understood. So I think that definitely gets easier over time. And in terms of answering the questions, I think we always try to send example questions, questions that the researchers want to know the answer to. And so then if people are getting too into the example, which does happen, that definitely does happen, because maybe that's more comfortable and easier. So then we have that set of questions there to try to fall back on, and they will be then more about exactly the type of feedback that you're looking for. So I'm trying to think of another way to word that. Does that make sense?
I think I understand you. Yeah, so I think it's the same message again. It's about being very clear, very structured, and putting in a lot of preparation up front. So you're very clear about what you want from them. So exactly, I suppose, for example, you could ask them a range of examples rather than just say, for example, this, and they'll focus on that. Or it might look like this, which is a different one. Then you could sort of also the common, how do you feel about your data being used in these ways?
Exactly, yeah. And I guess maybe part of it is, as a researcher, then if they have focused on an example, being able to take that away and try to understand, is there something underpinning this that's more broad? But also with sending the questions beforehand, it's something that the PPI members have told us they really like, because they feel like then they can think about it beforehand. I think they don't like to be surprised. As none of us do, to be fair. So when they turn up, they like to know when they're looking at the presentation what they should be focusing on, and maybe that also helps us. It's sort of prepping them as to what they might be asked.
Do you think that's the more so because this stuff is often technical, so they don't want to be blindsided and made to look stupid, so they'd like the questions in advance so they know what's coming and they can sort of think about it in a bit more detail and maybe do a bit Googling first?
Exactly. I definitely think it helps with the confidence, and I have noticed some people will come and they'll already have some notes and things. So I know ours are online, but when I've seen people in person, they've got notes in a notebook, so they've sort of already written their thoughts down. So yeah, I definitely think it helps with the confidence of giving their opinions. And like you said, you could look something up if you're not sure.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think it's challenging. It seems to be the big message, but worthwhile. But it's getting it set up. I think that you're talking about having this. I think the methodology panel going forward sounds like a great idea, but difficult to set up. You know, especially if you don't have the funding. I mean, it's the same problem, isn't it? When you're writing a grant, you've got no funding to do any kind of PPIE work, let alone methodology stuff, and trying to put all those bits together.
Yeah, there's definitely capacity issues here too. Exactly. I had the same experience, Ruth. I had this problem too in the past of wanting to talk about the method, but people getting caught up in the example. Yeah. And this is across many different groups. It's not just, working with public partners. And I have found that I keep going back to, this is about generalizing something. It's about something that'll be across projects. So I keep going back to that message if people get too caught up in a specific aspect of the example. But I also try to learn from it. If I see they're getting caught up in the type of outcome I'm using, then I'm like, maybe in the next session, I should just vary the outcome and see how they react to it. So trying to understand what is it about the example that's getting them confused or getting too specific. Why is that? And is it that we actually chose a bad example? You know what I mean? So that could be another way to think about it. But yeah, it's really, really helpful to have these discussions and to talk about the challenges of it. Because if we came here and just said, oh, this is super easy and I think that wouldn't be fair. It takes a lot of work, as Nikki and Ellen have shown. So thank you so much, Ruth, for your question. And I think we're coming close to the end. So if there are no other burning questions, I think we should wrap up. Unless you have anything else to add, Nikki and Ellen. Some final words. Are you happy?
Well, I just wanted to say, yeah, I think we do think the panel has been a real success, but yeah, we don't want to say, oh, it's just been a bed of roses, and we've definitely seen sessions where there are more applied and kind of less applied projects, how much easier it is for the applied project, isn't it? Like lots of times after the sessions, we've gone, oh gosh, it is sometimes really hard with methodology research for them to know how to contribute or what, you know, and yeah. So yes, just to emphasize, it is hard.
Thank you, Ellen. So thank you so much, both of you, for the presentation and for the transparency and sharing your experience. I'm sure we all learn from it. So I guess, Johnny, can you help me with the date of the next seminar? I should have it written in my notes, but I don't. Do you know?
I should have it as well. Let me double check really quickly.
There will be one coming up fairly soon.
The 15th of September, Monday.
Oh, so it's September. So we're taking a summer holiday and then we're back in September. So I hope you've enjoyed it and that you can join us again in September. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Nikki and Ellen.
Thanks.